Welcome back, everyone. I think I have an interesting one for you today. I want to talk about car guys and their insecurities. Now, this is going to take a little bit of a different twist than you might be thinking. A lot of times when people think of this topic, it's the classic, a guy buys an incredibly jacked up truck in order to, try to impress girls or really impress other guys, or buys a sports car and tears the exhaust off of it to make themselves look cool. Whatever it is, right? Insecurity, trying to cover up some insecurity via their vehicle. But and that's real, that does exist. But the true car enthusiast, truck enthusiast, actually tends to have the opposite problem. And by that I mean, I've found that a lot of car guys over the years who have worked very hard to build or afford to buy whatever their dream car is or current fun car, they feel like when people ask them about it, especially people that are not in the car community, they feel like they get very defensive and that they have to prove that it's okay that they've done what they've done. So I think the number one insecurity is financial. There is this misconception from people that are not in the car world that if you have, say, a Porsche, you automatically spend a bunch of money on it and it costs you a bunch of money to maintain, and you either must be severely in debt or very, very wealthy, right? That's just a stereotype that really happens a lot. You can apply that to other brands as well. We're just picking on Porsche for the sake of this argument. And I actually know a guy who I said to him, I kind of walked up to him. He didn't know me very well. I was like, hey, I saw your Porsche out there. I saw you get out of it the other day. Tell me more about it. What's the deal with that? Cool car, whatever. And the first thing he says is oh yeah, it's got high miles. It's got 77,000 miles. I didn't pay very much for it. And it wasn't in a braggadocious way, but I think he had been asked that question so many times by non-car people who were asking it judgmentally, hey, how does this guy, justify and afford a Porsche? Oh my God, it's crazy. That he's just kind of had built this storyline in his that he gave to people, which was factual, but defended him in his decision. And I kind of said to him, dude, I have freaking multiple vehicles. I'm not judging. I don't care what you spend on this car. I just want to know more about it, And he's realizing I was a car guy. We kind of had a different conversation at that point. And this guy's a true enthusiast, right? He's built vehicles before and really enjoys that car for what it is, and has done track days and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, he's not driving it because it's a cool car, which it is a cool car. He's driving it because he thoroughly appreciates what it can do and what that car is. And I just think that, there's more people like that in the car enthusiast world or in the car world than people realize outside of it. And that insecurity is a real thing. People do worry about that and worry about how people at work and in their social communities will view them depending on what they own. This is a dangerous scenario. Okay. And I can relate to that, honestly. So I bought my Camaro when I was just out of college. I had paid off my student loans. I worked my absolute friggin' butt off while I was in college to do that. And, I'm not going to lie. My parents had saved up some amount of money, and my great uncle did, to help us go to college, my brother and I. So I didn't pay the entire shot, but I paid a good chunk of it myself. I'm proud of that. I'm also proud to say that my family made responsible decisions to help me too, right? There's nothing to be ashamed of with that either, in my opinion. And I fully understand and realize that other people weren't as fortunate to have that. So both those things can be true. Anyway, I'm really digressing. Point is, I bought the Camaro when I was, 22 or 23. And back then, in 2017, it was a $25,000 car with a, whatever it was, GM certified 5-year warranty or whatever, 50,000 mile warranty. I forget what they were offering back then, but a good warranty. It was just a good, solid used car. Taking away the thought that it was a sports car, it wouldn't have even mattered. It was just a good purchase because it was a good, reliable used car. And I had a long commute, and not that a Camaro gets the best mileage, but it sure as heck does better than this Silverado that I owned at the time and still am driving to this day. But man, I'll tell you, as a young guy buying that car, the amount of flack that I got at work for driving that thing, I mean, you'd be shocked. Like, it was just such a, like, I hate to say it, but it was such a bad experience. So many people were, like, truly hardcore judging me for having bought this car. Oh, it's such a stupid financial decision. There's no way you can afford that, and all that kind of stuff. And they were pretty forthcoming with saying it. And I would say I had good coworkers overall, but this freaking personal car purchase I made kind of brought out the worst in some of my coworkers. And it really made me, like, insecure, I guess you could say, about owning this car for a while. And honest to God, I almost thought about selling it a couple times because I'm like, I don't know, maybe they're right. Like, maybe I shouldn't have bought it, luckily I kind of got over that, and I just got to a point where I said to myself, I really don't care what they think. Little did they know, right? I had paid off my student loans. I was really still saving up money pretty well. I paid off that loan, and 5-year car loan, I probably paid it off in like 2.5 years. I was very diligent about that. I wasn't messing around. I'm pretty responsible with my money overall, right? I like to have fun, but I also am pretty good about saving and stuff. So anyway, kind of fast forward a few years later, 4 or 5 years later, and this Silverado, which now has 251,000 miles on it, at the time had 245,000 miles on it, let's say. This was earlier this year in February. And it just got to a point where I needed to get a new truck. I couldn't keep this thing together and do what I wanted to do with it anymore. I just had to get a new truck. And I had been putting that off for years, just kind of honestly for the same reasons. I'm like, oh my God, I can't imagine having, 2 trucks and this Camaro. And I really didn't want to sell this truck. I love this truck to death, despite its flaws. I just do. I find it really fun to drive and whatnot. But I'm like, people are going to think I'm crazy, and not even, I shouldn't even say that. At that point, I didn't worry so much about what people would think. I kind of was more worried, like, what I would think of myself in a sense, What was it a smart financial decision? That sort of thing. So that being said, this truck got to a point where I just decided I got to pull the trigger. So I bought the Ford. And it's just so funny because, I was definitely, a little bit insecure again by having that new truck. And again, not that I care what people thought this time, but I almost felt as though, kind of like this guy I was talking to about the Porsche, that I almost needed to justify why I bought it to people. And, I noticed that when people would ask me, and it was a lot more positive response. People were like, oh, dude, that's a really nice truck or whatever, right? It wasn't negative this time, maybe just because I'm older, I'm not really sure. But it was more positive, and I still found myself saying, yeah, the old one was breaking down, and believe it or not, I was spending almost as much money as the payment is for the new truck, maintaining and keeping this old one alive because I was breaking so much stuff, which was true. It literally is true, but nobody asked, right? So why did I feel the need to justify it? And I think that's the lesson there, especially as a car guy. The only person you need to justify your automotive-related purchases to and habits to are yourself and your immediate family, right? The people it's affecting in your life. Not random coworkers, not random friends even. Now listen, if close, trusted family members and friends who are not judgmental and truly are looking out for your best interests are telling you you're spending too much money on your car hobby, then you might be spending too much money on your car hobby, right? You also don't want to be blind to people's feedback. But at the same time, you need to realize that people are not going to understand your perspective. And if you really do the math on all of it, people are not going to understand the fact that you are, potentially saving a lot of money by working on your own stuff, and your hobby money that, they would spend freaking scrapbooking and going on lavish European vacations is instead going into your hobby car, right? Maybe you're building a drag car or whatever you're doing. People don't see that side of it, right? As they're sipping their $9 Starbucks coffee, they're judging you for spending a little bit extra money in gas because you drove a less fuel efficient enthusiast car to work that day, right? So you just got to kind of put that in perspective and understand that people don't necessarily even mean anything bad by it. They just have different priorities, and they're looking at your life through the lens of their own life, which isn't probably the best lens for them to look at your life through. Now, as far as how much you actually should be spending on your automotive hobby, there's a lot of debate. There's a lot of different ways you can break it down. So Dave Ramsey's approach for non-automotive enthusiasts, right, is your car shouldn't be, you should pay cash for it, and your car shouldn't be any more than 50% of your annual income. So to keep the numbers simple, if you make $100,000 a year, you shouldn't buy a car that's valued at more than $50,000. Honestly, I think that is a great piece of advice for most people who are not hardcore car enthusiasts, especially, because you can get a really nice car for 50 grand if you don't buy something brand new, or you're not going for some super high luxury thing. I'll say it's harder to do that now than it used to be, but hey, I got a Ford F-250, pretty nice Ford F-250 for just a little over that. You can do it. You definitely can do it. But if you are an enthusiast and you spend a lot of your hobby money toward automobiles, in my opinion, that number then can go up a little bit, right? Like if person A has that $100,000 income with the $50,000 car, but spends $10,000 a year on other hobbies, well then why shouldn't my car be able to be 60 grand? And then, not to push it too much, but really it could be more than that potentially, because that's a one-time purchase. So if the fuel economy and some of the maintenance costs aren't radically different than a regular car, even if that initial purchase price is 70, 80 grand, maybe it doesn't matter because I'm actually going to drive it long enough and get the use out of it that it's, and take better care of it, that my cost per mile is not so much different than somebody who bought like a random Honda Civic type thing, right? So there's just a lot of different math you can do and ways to look at it, to where I think you can find a good balance between financial security and not spending every last dime you make, because the automotive hobby is always tempting you to do that. And you can still have some fun and have some cool cars, right? And if you take that $70,000, $80,000, let's just say, and split it between 2 or 3 vehicles, and now you can have some more modest cars and then have a hobby car or two, or a motorcycle and a hobby car, right? Like, I'm an engineer by trade. I don't have some crazy income. Let's be honest, I have like an above average income, but it's not anything amazing. But I have a few vehicles, and 3 vehicles and a motorcycle and the camper. But I also did a good job of like buying them all in very specific ways. Like, this truck was $11,000 10 years ago. I put a lot of money into it, but still it was kind of cheap in the big scheme of things. The car was 25 grand 7 years ago. My truck was 52 instead of $90,000 because I didn't go for the diesel with leather, right? I went for a used gasser. Like, you can kind of get the same thing and just not spend as much money. The camper was 13 grand cash in 2020, like the dead low of the market. It's not even worth that much less than that now. So that's the other side of it too. If you're not buying brand new stuff and eating a ton of depreciation, if I wanted to sell all these vehicles and consolidate and go down to one thing, for the amount of miles I've put on all these vehicles and where they've all gotten me to, like, I wouldn't lose that much money. My cost per mile is probably not horrendously different than anybody else's. And a big part of that's because I've done a lot of my own work and maintained things very well. And that's all time that I'll never get back, i.e. money I'll never get back. But that's the hobby side of it, right? Like, that time I'm spending maintaining things is that. So I'm severely digressing here, but the point is, there's just so much to it that the average person isn't thinking about, that you gotta just do you. And if you got a hobby of any sort, this goes beyond cars. Your hobby's freaking swords or custom knives, or it's video games, or whatever it is. Just set a reasonable budget. Make sure that you're making ends meet and you're not literally cutting into your dinner table kind of thing, and live your life. And not to be like the you only live once kind of thing, but you do only live once, and you got to make the best of it. So if you delay gratification so much so that you wait until you're 65 years old to buy a cheap Corvette, even though you're a multi-millionaire, let's say, not to be a jerk, but like, what good is it? You're freaking 65, 70 years old. I mean, it's awesome. You should still own it, but I want to have had that fun throughout my 20s and 30s. I bought a Camaro at 22, and I'm still driving it going on 30, and will have it for the foreseeable future and or a new one. And I'm just like living life, having fun, still saving money. I still have a retirement going. I'm not going to be bankrupt when I'm 70, you know? Like, I'm not spending every dollar I make. Balance. Balance, balance, balance. And with that being said, folks, as always, thanks for watching. God bless America, and I'll see you on the next one. Happy motoring. Goodbye.